Lyra stepped out of the sleek human diplomatic shuttle onto the iridescent landing pad, taking in her first breath of Zephyrian air. Around her, the alien city of Zalios stretched out in sweeping crystalline spires and arching opalescent walkways, glittering under the light of the triple moons. As humanity's chosen emissary to Zephyria, it was Lyra's duty and privilege to be here. She straightened her shoulders, the formal white and gold uniform of the human diplomatic corps feeling suddenly heavy with responsibility. Her mission was critical, to build a bridge of understanding between mankind and the Zephyrians after years of tense silence following first contact. Ambassador Lyra, welcome to Zephyria. A male voice rang out, translated by her comlink earpiece. She turned to see a tall Zephyrian male striding across the landing pad, flanked by an entourage of guards and attendants. He was draped in shimmering ivory robes, trimmed with intricate gold and crimson embroidery, denoting his high rank. His features were striking, angular and noble, with luminous amber eyes and a crown of horns sweeping back from his forehead. Lyra inclined her head respectfully. Thank you for the welcome. I am honored to be here. You must be Minister Callis. Indeed, Callis replied, stopping an arm's length in front of her. His eyes flicked over her, his expression unreadable. I have been appointed to oversee your visit, Ambassador. Something in his tone gave Lyra pause. She had expected reserved formality, but there was an edge to Callis' words she couldn't quite place. Dismissive, perhaps even disdainful. She pushed the thought aside and smiled diplomatically. I look forward to working together, Minister Callis. I believe our two species have much to learn from one another. Callis' eyes narrowed slightly. Do you presume to lecture us, human? Zephyria's knowledge and achievements span millennia before your kind even looked to the stars. The only matter to be discussed is how humanity will submit to our Imperium. Lyra blinked, taken aback by the open derision in his words. This was not the reception she had anticipated. Humanity had worked for years to initiate a peaceful and respectful dialogue with Zephyria. Determined to start off on the right foot despite his remarks, she maintained her poise. With respect, Minister, I believe you may have some misconceptions about humanity's intentions. We come in a spirit of cooperation and equality, seeking to learn about your great culture. Callis cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand, his long cloak flaring with the abrupt movement. The Zephyrian Imperium extends its reach across 100 star systems and 1,000 worlds. Millions bow to our sovereign's glory. What can your fledgling species possibly offer us except servitude? His attendants chittered and hissed their agreement, the guttural sounds setting Lyra even further on edge. She drew herself up, squaring her shoulders and meeting Callis' gaze steadily. She would not let herself be cowed by his bluster. Humanity may be young compared to Zephyria, she said evenly, but we have spent our brief centuries among the stars striving for unity, equality, and the betterment of all species. You do both our peoples a disservice to dismiss us so quickly. To her surprise, Callis threw his horned head back and laughed, a harsh and arrogant sound that echoed across the landing platform. Ah, such naivety. The universe favors only the strong. Unity and equality are fantasies for the weak. You will learn your proper place soon enough, Ambassador. With that he turned on his heel, his embroidered cloak swirling around him. Come, you will be shown to your quarters to freshen up before tonight's welcoming banquet. I trust you will not keep the sovereign waiting with any more of your foolish idealism. Lyra stood still for a long moment, struggling to process the pure malice behind Callis' words. She had trained for years for this mission, learning everything known about Zephyrian language and culture, rehearsing for every eventuality, except outright disdain and threats from her very first encounter. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Lyra followed Callis and his retinue across the glittering causeway toward the towering central citadel. Despite the minister's open hostility, she had to believe there were other Zephyrians more open to friendly exchange. She could not let one arrogant official's prejudice derail this vital mission. As she walked, head held high, her comm implant crackled to life in her ear. Captain Jace to Ambassador Lyra. How copy? The familiar calm voice instantly soothed her rattled nerves. I read you, Captain, she murmured, just getting acquainted with our gracious host. Her tone made it clear the conversation wasn't going as planned. Did he say something to upset you? I told you I should have come with you. Her husband's protective nature brought a faint smile to her face despite the situation. "I'm fine, Jace. Nothing I can't handle. Maybe he's just trying to rattle me, see if I'll lose my cool. At the very least, I don't think he'll be joining your fan club anytime soon." Jace's low chuckle vibrated through the comm. "Few do, my love. I've got your back, no matter what. Zephyrian Imperium be damned. I know. But please, stay with the shuttle for now. I don't want to provoke anything." Lyra glanced ahead to Kalis and his guards disappearing into the arched entrance of the Citadel. "I have a feeling diplomacy is going to be an uphill climb on this mission, but I have to try." "And you will. No one is better suited to building bridges than you. Just be careful, all right? I don't trust these scaly bastards farther than I can throw them. I will. Love you." "Love you too, Madam Ambassador." Jace out. Lyra allowed herself one last fortifying breath as she crossed the threshold into the ornate foyer of the Citadel, following an attendant who waited to conduct her to her quarters. Despite Minister Kalis' arrogant dismissal of humanity, she would not give up on her mission so easily. There had to be more reasonable minds among the Zephyrian leadership. For the sake of both their species, she had to believe it. But even so, a seed of worry took root in her chest. She couldn't shake the sense that Kalis' disdain was more than just bluster, that his threats carried an ominous weight. As humanity's representative, she suddenly felt very alone and very far from home. Squaring her shoulders once more, Lyra pushed her unease aside. She had a job to do, a vital task entrusted to her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with all the strength, patience, and wisdom she could muster. The path to peace was often rocky, but she had to believe it was a path worth taking. The great hall of the Zephyrian Citadel was a marvel of alien architecture, with soaring ceilings adorned with holographic star maps, and walls shimmering with the iridescent scales of long-dead Zephyrian heroes. Lyra couldn't help but gape as she was escorted into the cavernous space by a silent attendant. Hundreds of Zephyrians were already gathered, draped in the shimmering finery of the Imperium's elite. They milled about in small groups, sipping from elaborate goblets and chattering in their sibilant language. All eyes turned to Lyra as she entered, and she felt the weight of their collective gaze like a physical pressure. At the far end of the hall, a raised dais held a massive throne carved from a single block of luminous crystal. Upon it sat a figure that could only be the Zephyrian sovereign, a formidable-looking female draped in robes of shimmering gold, a crown of glittering gems resting upon her horned brow. Minister Kalis stood at the sovereign's right hand, his ivory robes a stark contrast to her gold. As Lyra approached the dais, bowing deeply, she saw a flicker of something dark and satisfied cross Kalis' angular features. "Ah, the human ambassador graces us with her presence at last," the sovereign said, her voice a low and dangerous purr. "We have been most curious to lay eyes upon the representative of Earth's upstart regime." Lyra straightened, meeting the sovereign's unblinking amber gaze. "Your Majesty, I am honored to stand before you as an emissary of peace and friendship between our worlds." The sovereign tilted her head, a predatory bird eyeing a particularly audacious mouse. "Peace and friendship, you say? And what would your kind know of such things? We have observed your chaotic, violent history, your ceaseless striving and constant war. What could such a species possibly teach the Imperium of peace?" Lyra took a measured breath, painfully aware of the hundreds of eyes upon her. "Your Majesty, it is true that humanity's past is marked by conflict and strife, but it is through our struggles that we have learned the true value of unity, of setting aside our differences in the face of a greater purpose. These are the hard-won lessons we wish to share, in a spirit of mutual respect and growth." Kalis scoffed loudly, drawing the attention of the gathered court. "Respect? Growth? Bold words from a species barely a century from their first fumbling steps to the stars. You forget your place, Ambassador." Lyra turned to face him, keeping her expression carefully neutral even as anger flashed through her. "With respect, Minister Kalis, humanity's place is among the community of sentient species, as equals and partners. We do not seek to forget our place, but to earn it through cooperation and understanding." The sovereign watched the exchange with hooded eyes, her clawed fingers tapping thoughtfully upon the arm of her throne. "It seems our human guest has spirit, at least. Perhaps we shall see if your deeds match your words in the coming days, Ambassador. Minister Kalis will be your guide and liaison during your stay. I trust you will heed his counsel most carefully." It was a clear dismissal. Lyra bowed deeply, fighting to keep her frustration from showing. "As you command, Your Majesty." As she straightened, she caught Callus' eye. The Zephyrian minister was smiling, but there was no warmth in it, only a cold, predatory satisfaction. In that moment, Lyra knew her mission had just become infinitely more difficult. Callus would be working against her at every turn, undermining her efforts to build bridges between their species. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of alien pageantry and carefully coded conversations. Lyra played her role as humanity's ambassador to the hilt, smiling and chatting and sipping the strangely luminous Zephyrian wine, as if she hadn't a care in the world. But all the while, her mind was racing. She needed allies among the Zephyrian court, individuals who could see beyond Callus' blatant xenophobia. But how to find them? How to win their trust when the Minister of Defense himself seemed bent on painting humanity as a threat and an upstart to be crushed beneath the heel of the Imperium? It was late into the alien night when Lyra finally returned to her quarters, her head spinning with the effort of navigating the treacherous currents of Zephyrian politics. She had barely settled onto the oddly organic curves of the sleeping pod when her comm crackled to life. Jace to Lyra. "How's my favorite ambassador doing after her first big shindig with the scaly set?" Despite her exhaustion, Lyra couldn't help but smile at the sound of her husband's voice. "Oh, you know, winning hearts and minds, one sip of glowy bug juice at a time. How are things at your end? The crew hasn't started an interstellar incident in my absence, have they?" Jace's chuckle was a welcome balm to her frayed nerves, not for lack of trying. Braz nearly took a swing at one of the Zephyrian dockworkers who was getting a little too handsy with the hull plating. "Can't say I blame him." Lyra sighed, rubbing her temples. "We need to be careful, Jace. The situation here is delicate, more than I realized. Minister Callus is not the ally I'd hoped for. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm not surprised. I've seen his type before. All spit and polish on the outside, but rotten to the core. You watch yourself around him, you hear me? Don't let him bully you." "I won't. But I can't afford to make an enemy of him either. Not if we want this mission to succeed. I have to find a way to reach the Sovereign, to make her see that humanity comes in goodwill." "And you will, my love. You're the smartest, most stubborn diplomat I know. If anyone can crack this tough nut, it's you." Lyra smiled softly, wishing more than anything that Jace was here with her, his solid presence at her side. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Captain. I needed that." "Anytime, Ambassador. Now get some rest. You'll need your wits about you to deal with these fork-tongued politicians in the morning." "Aye aye, sir." Lyra out. As the comlink went silent, Lyra settled back into the sleeping pod, her mind still whirling. Jace was right. She would need every ounce of her diplomatic skill and patience to navigate the challenges ahead. But for the sake of the fragile peace between their species, she had to try. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, Lyra's last thought was of the cold satisfaction on Callus' face as he watched her struggle at the banquet. She had a sinking feeling that the Zephyrian minister's enmity was far more than simple dislike or distrust. There was something deeper there, something personal. She would need to tread very carefully indeed in the days to come. The future of human-Zephyrian relations could well depend on it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, formal ceremonies, and carefully orchestrated cultural exchanges. Lyra threw herself into her role as humanity's ambassador, determined to make the most of every opportunity to foster understanding between their species. But at every turn, Minister Callus was there, a constant shadow at the edge of her vision. He stalked the halls of the citadel like a predator, his amber eyes always watching, his words always barbed with subtle menace. Lyra tried to ignore him, to focus on building relationships with the other members of the Zephyrian court, but Callus' influence was pervasive. She could see it in the way the other officials deferred to him, in the way conversations would fall silent when he entered a room. It all came to a head during a formal negotiation session regarding the establishment of a human embassy on Zephyria. Lyra had been making a passionate case for the benefits of cultural exchange, of the ways their species could learn from and enrich each other. Callus had listened in stony silence, his clawed fingers steepled before him. As Lyra finished her argument, he leaned forward, his amber eyes glinting. "You speak of exchange and enrichment, Ambassador," he said, his voice a low hiss. But what you propose is an infection, a corruption of our pure Zephyrian ways by your chaotic human influence. The Imperium has stood for 1,000 generations without the meddling of outsiders. We will not allow it now. Lyra took a steadying breath, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. Minister Callus, with respect, you misunderstand our intentions. We do not seek to impose our ways on Zephyria, merely to learn from your ancient wisdom and share our own experiences in a spirit of mutual growth. Callus slammed his fist on the table, his composure slipping. Mutual growth. Ha, I know what your kind truly wants. To infiltrate, to subvert, to conquer. Your soft words of peace and friendship are nothing but a veil for your true ambitions. He stood abruptly, his robes swirling around him. This farce has gone on long enough. I will not allow your poisonous influence to corrupt the Imperium any further. Lyra stood as well, alarm rising in her throat. Minister Callus, please, let us discuss this reasonably. But Callus was beyond reason. With a snarl of rage, he lashed out, striking Lyra across the face with the back of his hand. She staggered backward, more shocked than hurt, her hand flying to her stinging cheek. For a moment, the room was frozen in stunned silence. Then, pandemonium erupted. Zephyrian guards surged forward, their energy pikes crackling. Human security personnel, Jace at their head, charged into the room, weapons drawn. Lyra. Jace was at her side in an instant, his face a mask of fury as he took in the red mark blooming on her cheek. What happened? Are you all right? Lyra gripped his arm, her heart pounding. I'm fine, Jace. Just a misunderstanding. But Jace wasn't listening. He rounded on Callus, his blaster leveled at the Zephyrian's chest. You dare lay a hand on an ambassador of Earth? Give me one reason why I shouldn't blast you to atoms right now, you scaly bastard. Callus hissed, his amber eyes slitted with rage. You dare threaten me, human. I am Minister of Defense, voice of the Sovereign. Your ambassador brought this upon herself with her insolence. The room teetered on the brink of chaos, human and Zephyrian forces poised to tear each other apart. Lyra's mind raced, desperate to find a way to defuse the situation before it escalated beyond control. Enough. The Sovereign's voice cracked like a whip, silencing the tumult. She strode into the room, her golden robes trailing behind her, her amber eyes flashing. Explain this outrage, Minister Callus. Callus drew himself up, his horns glinting in the harsh light. Your Majesty, the human ambassador has overstepped her bounds. She seeks to undermine our way of life, to infect the Imperium with her chaos. I was simply putting her in her place. The Sovereign turned her unblinking gaze on Lyra, taking in her reddened cheek and Jace's protective stance at her side. And this is how you treat an emissary of peace, Minister, with violence and disrespect. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Callus' angular features. Your Majesty, The Sovereign silenced him with a sharp gesture. You forget yourself, Callus. The human ambassador is here under my protection and grace. An attack on her is an attack on the Imperium itself. You have overstepped your authority. Callus' scales flushed a dark, angry crimson, but he bowed his head. As you command, Your Majesty. The Sovereign turned to Lyra, her expression unreadable. Ambassador, you have my deepest apologies for this shameful display. Rest assured, it will not happen again. Minister Callus will be dealt with most severely for his transgression. Lyra inclined her head, trying to steady her racing heart. Thank you, Your Majesty. I appreciate your intervention. I assure you, my mission of peace remains unchanged. This misunderstanding will not deter humanity's desire for friendship between our peoples. The Sovereign regarded her for a long moment, something almost like respect flickering in her amber eyes. You have strength, Ambassador. I admire that. We will speak again soon, under better circumstances. With that, she swept from the room, Callus slinking behind her like a chastised hound. As the doors closed behind them, Lyra sagged against Jace, the adrenaline draining from her in a rush. Are you sure you're okay? Jace murmured, his arms tightening around her. Say the word, and we're out of here. Diplomacy be damned. Lyra shook her head, drawing strength from his solid presence. No, we can't give up now. Not when we're so close. This incident could be the breakthrough we needed. The Sovereign herself intervened on our behalf. That has to mean something. Jace sighed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I hope you're right, love. But I don't trust these scaly snakes as far as I can throw them. Especially not that callous bastard. He's got it out for you, for all of us." Lyra nodded grimly, her cheeks still throbbing. "I know, but we have to try. For the sake of our peoples. For the future." But even as she spoke the words, a chill crept down her spine. The look in Callus' eyes as he'd struck her, the venom in his voice. There was a deeper darkness there, a hatred that went beyond mere xenophobia or political maneuvering. She had made a powerful enemy today, one who would stop at nothing to see her fail, to see humanity crushed beneath the boot of Zephyrian supremacy. The path ahead had just become infinitely more treacherous. But Lyra squared her shoulders, setting her jaw with determination. She was humanity's ambassador, chosen for this mission for her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering commitment to peace. She would not be cowed by the likes of Callus. No matter what storms lay ahead, she would weather them. For the sake of the Alliance, for the dream of two species, human and Zephyrian, standing together as equals among the stars, she would not fail. The game was truly afoot now, and the stakes could not be higher. The aftermath of Callus' attack was like a shockwave rippling through the Zephyrian court. Hushed whispers followed Lyra wherever she went, her reddened cheek a stark reminder of the minister's transgression. To her surprise, the incident seemed to have garnered her a measure of respect among certain factions of the court. She found herself approached by officials who had previously held themselves aloof, their amber eyes glinting with a new appraisal. "You showed strength in the face of callous dishonor," one elderly Zephyrian said, his scales dull with age. "There are many in the court who have grown weary of his arrogance and bellicosity. Perhaps it is time for a change." Lyra seized upon these overtures, working tirelessly to build alliances and sway opinions. She spoke passionately of the benefits of cooperation, of the wonders that could be achieved if humanity and Zephyria combined their strengths. But even as she made headway, Callus' shadow loomed large. Though he had been publicly rebuked by the sovereign, his power and influence remained formidable. Lyra could feel his malevolent gaze upon her, his every word dripping with barely contained menace. It all came to a head when a shocking revelation rocked the citadel. Evidence emerged that Callus had been secretly funneling weapons and resources to extremist factions within the Imperium, factions that advocated for Zephyrian supremacy and the subjugation of lesser species. Lyra found herself called before the sovereign, the evidence laid out before them in damning clarity. Callus stood accused of treason, of undermining the very foundations of the Imperium. "What do you have to say for yourself, Minister?" the sovereign demanded, her amber eyes flashing with fury. Callus hissed, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. "I have done only what is necessary to ensure the supremacy of the Imperium. These humans are a threat to our way of life, a cancer that must be excised before it spreads." Lyra stepped forward, her voice ringing clear and strong. "Your Majesty, Minister Callus' actions are not those of a loyal servant of the Imperium. They are the actions of a xenophobic extremist, one who would plunge our peoples into war for the sake of his own prejudice and ambition." The sovereign regarded Callus coldly, her claws tapping a staccato rhythm on the arm of her throne. "You have betrayed my trust, Callus. Betrayed the very principles upon which the Imperium was founded. I hereby strip you of your rank and position. You will face the full consequences of your treachery." Callus snarled, his eyes wild with fury. "You are blind, all of you. The humans will be our undoing. Mark my words, they will." His tirade was cut short as Zephyrian guards seized him, dragging him away in chains. As the doors slammed shut behind him, a heavy silence fell over the throne room. The sovereign turned to Lyra, her expression unreadable. "Ambassador, it seems we owe you a great debt. Your steadfast commitment to peace, even in the face of callous aggression and deceit, has opened our eyes to the true potential of an alliance with humanity." Lyra bowed deeply, her heart soaring with tentative hope. "Your Majesty, I am honored by your words. I truly believe that our peoples have much to learn from and offer each other. Let this be the first step on a path of mutual understanding and respect." The sovereign inclined her head, a rare smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Indeed, Ambassador. Indeed. There is much work to be done, but I have faith that together we can build a brighter future for both our peoples." As Lyra left the throne room, her steps light with relief and triumph, Jace fell into step beside her, his hand finding hers, and squeezing tight. "You did it, love," he murmured, his voice thick with pride. "You took on that scaly bastard and won. Remind me never to get on your bad side." Lyra leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "We did it, Jace. All of us. This is a victory for humanity, for the dream of peace." But even as she savored the moment, Lyra knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Kalis may have been defeated, but his rhetoric of hate and supremacy still found fertile ground in some corners of the Imperium. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But for now, she allowed herself to hope, to believe in the possibility of a future where human and Zephyrian stood side by side, as equals and allies. It was a future worth fighting for, and fight she would, with every ounce of her strength and conviction. For the sake of both their peoples, she would not rest until that dream became reality. The stars awaited, a vast and wondrous frontier full of infinite potential, and hand in hand, human and Zephyrian would face that frontier together. A new chapter was dawning, and Lyra couldn't wait to see what it would bring. In the wake of Kalis' downfall, a new era dawned on Zephyria. The Sovereign, true to her word, worked tirelessly with Lyra to forge a new relationship between their peoples, one based on mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation. It wasn't easy. There were still those in the Imperium who clung to Kalis' ideals, who viewed humanity with suspicion and contempt. But Lyra met their opposition with unwavering diplomacy and grace, winning over skeptics one by one. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Human scientists and scholars arrived on Zephyria, eager to learn from the Imperium's vast knowledge and share their own innovations. Zephyrian dignitaries visited Earth, marveling at the diversity and resilience of human culture. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges initiated. For the first time in history, humanity and Zephyria were learning from each other, growing together. Through it all, Lyra and Jace were at the forefront, the face of this new alliance. They worked tirelessly, side by side, to build bridges and mend old wounds. And as they did, something else blossomed between them, a bond of love and partnership that transcended species and culture. It was a love that was tested when, a year into the new era, Kalis escaped from his prison on a remote moon. Enraged and embittered, he gathered his remaining followers and launched a desperate attack on the Citadel, determined to overthrow the Sovereign and crush the human infestation once and for all. It was a fierce battle, one that pushed human and Zephyrian alike to their limits. But in the end, the alliance held strong. Lyra and Jace fought side by side, a seamless unit of determination and skill, leading the charge against Kalis' forces. In the final confrontation, it was Jace who faced down Kalis, his blaster locked on the fallen minister's heart. Kalis sneered, his scales glinting in the dim light of the throne room. "You think you've won, human?" he hissed, his claws flexing. "You think your alliance can last? You are nothing but parasites, clinging to the glory of the Imperium. In the end, we will cast you off and reclaim our rightful place as masters of the galaxy." Jace's hand was steady on his blaster, his eyes hard. "You're wrong, Kalis. You've always been wrong. Humanity and Zephyria are stronger together than they ever were apart. We're not parasites, we're partners. And that's something you'll never understand." In the end, it was Zephyrian justice that decided Kalis' fate. He was tried and convicted by a tribunal of his peers, sentenced to a lifetime of exile on a barren world, stripped of all rank and privilege. As he was led away in chains, Lyra couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity mixed with the satisfaction of justice served. Kalis had been a product of his time, his hatred and prejudice, a reflection of a Zephyria that was now fading into the past. In the aftermath of the battle, as the smoke cleared and the wounds began to heal, Lyra stood with Jace on the balcony of the Citadel, looking out over the gleaming spires of the city. "We did it," she murmured, leaning into his embrace. "We actually did it. Human and Zephyrian, standing together." Jace pressed a kiss to her hair, his arms tightening around her. "You did it, love. You never lost faith, never stopped fighting for what you believed in. I'm just lucky I got to be along for the ride." Lyra turned in his arms, looking up into his face, the face she had come to love more than any other. "Luck had nothing to do with it. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Jace. You're my strength, my partner in all things." He smiled softly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "And you're mine, Lyra. Always." Their kiss was soft and sweet, a promise of all the days to come. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Lyra knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Human and Zephyrian, hand in hand, heart to heart. The future was theirs to shape, a bright and shining thing full of hope and promise. And shape it they would, with every beat of their hearts, every breath in their lungs. For in the end, it was love that had brought them here. And it was love that would carry them forward, to the very stars themselves.